What's up, everybody? Rose Namajunas, former UFC strawweight champion, is set to face Zhang Weili, current strawweight champion, April 24th at UFC 262. So, as promised, I'm going to go ahead and break down just how good is Rose Namajunas. Now, like I said, Rose Namajunas is the former UFC strawweight champion. She achieved the championship belt by knocking out Joanna in the first round of their first meeting. And then the rematch, she had her first title defense against Joanna, and she went the distance with her and won the fight on a decision. Now, to break down every little intangible about Rose will make this video way longer than it already is. So I'm going to focus mostly on her skills, her defensive skills, her offensive skills, special tools she has, like KO power, submissions, her discipline, her conditioning, her ability to go the distance, and her knowledge of range, traps, and timing. So the biggest thing, first, if we look at her defensive skills, the big thing that Rose has is her footwork. She doesn't use a lot of fancy head movement. She'll occasionally pull out the way. She's very good at a pull counter. She doesn't always pull counter, though. She usually step back to get out the way, to get out of range of danger before moving back into the danger zone where she retaliates. But she uses her footwork mostly. She doesn't use a lot of blocking. She doesn't use a lot of head movement. It's her footwork, which is fine because as my coach teaches it, footwork is the first and best sign of defense. Blocking would be second, and then head movement would be last. And the reason why is if you use footwork, you're getting completely out of the way of danger. If you understand it properly, you're putting yourself in a position where you can retaliate without being hurt. If you block, well, you're still not receiving damage, significant damage, hopefully, but your body's still taking damage. You can't sit there and block all day. If I block a punch with my forearm or with my elbow, it still hurts me as much as my opponent, especially if you're a heavyweight and you're fighting somebody like Francis Ngannou. If you block his punches, it's still going to hurt your arm, it's still going to hurt your shoulders or whatever he lands on. Same thing for kicks. If you block kicks or if you check kicks the wrong way, it can hurt you just as much as it hurts your opponent. And like I said, you're usually not in the safest position when you're blocking because you're still in the line of fire. The reason head movement goes last is because you usually only use head movement if your footwork and your blocking have failed. And using head movement too much can get you off balance. We see this with Israel Adesanya. Occasionally, he'll lose his balance and his footing while he's using his head movement to get out of the way. Even his fight against Paulo Costa, even though he was very dominant in that fight, we saw in the first round that Adesanya slips and he falls backwards. So the head movement, using the head movement only instead of your blocking or instead of your footwork can get you in trouble. So footwork, Rose is very good at that, and I would dare to say that out of the people who are contending for the championship right now, in her division, Andrade, I know Andrade is set to face somebody else, but Andrade was in her weight class. Andrade, Zhang Weili, and Joanna, her defensive footwork, I believe, is some of the best. I think Joanna comes close, but I believe Rose is a little bit better than Joanna is. Now, the real beauty for Rose is her offensive footwork. One thing she's very good at is stepping off the center line to get inside. Now, if you look at this diagram, you'll explain why this is very important. If you stand square, toe-to-toe with somebody, when you land a punch on them, they can also land one on you. This is why you always see boxers circling each other. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get off their opponent's center line so they can hit without being hit, which is the main point of boxing. And Rose has a very good understanding of this. She likes to get off the center line. Now, I should have mentioned this when I was talking about her defensive footwork, is that stepping off the center line. As you can see from this diagram, if these two fighters are standing in this direction, when one throws a punch, the other one can retaliate equally. Now, if one fighter has longer reach than the other, they're more than likely going to win this exchange. What Rose does, and what she did against Joanna, in the first fight and in their rematch, it was just more effective in the first fight because she caught Joanna instead of with her overhand right. She caught her with a left hook. And I don't even think Joanna saw that coming. So when she steps off the center line, she's putting herself in a safe position, out of the range of her opponent's fire, and putting her opponent directly in the range of usually her right hand. In the rematch, she tagged Joanna quite a few times in the first and second round with this over and over again. So that footwork that she uses is what helps her get inside. Now, one thing that she did do in her fight against Joanna that I didn't like too much, the second one, was she kept going in the same direction only. And the thing is, if you have an opponent who's reading how you're moving and you keep going in the same direction, it's easier for them to set up traps on you. And this is what Joanna's did in the rounds 3 and 4. She knew exactly where Rose was going to go because she kept going the same direction. Now, this works if you don't finish your opponent. Sorry, this works if you do finish your opponent, but if you don't finish them and they're still there, you're starting to put yourself in danger because, a good fighter, a good technician is going to start to read where you're going and say, okay, if you're going to keep moving to my right, then I'm going to start setting up traps for you to walk right into. That said, though, she was able to survive and weather the storm of rounds 3 and 4 and was still able to come on top victorious. So what really helped Rose get to the position she is right now is the improvement of her boxing skills. She doesn't throw a whole lot of kicks. She seldom throws knees. I know in her first fight with Andrade, she did drop her with a knee that she lifted up. I believe it was a left knee. You'll see the clip here in a second. That's what she dropped her with. But the footwork is what does it. And you can see here while she's training, she's forward stepping and she's making sure that her right foot follows her left foot. Now, why is this very important? Rose burns a lot of energy doing this. So the conditioning needs to be there. And like I said, she is a finisher. And that burns, that's very taxing on the body to keep moving. But she's able to do this for 5 rounds. She slows down a little bit. A lot of people question her cardio, but I'm like, no, she's burning energy. But she's using it rather efficiently because she's been conditioned for this. Now, a lot of people see people moving, but they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. When Rose steps in with her left foot, if the right foot doesn't follow, she'll be off balance. And when you have too wide of a stance, especially in MMA, it's very easy for someone to take you down, leg kick you, and hurt you. Joanna was able to land some very good leg kicks against Rose in their first fight, and you saw her legs starting to get red as the rounds progressed because the leg was there to be hit. But with Rose stepping off of that angle, that does help her prevent that. And by her following up by planting her right leg in the proper position, that keeps her from receiving as much damage. If she is off balance and she had a very wide stance, kind of like what Conor McGregor does, the kicks would do a lot more damage. Also, if you step in properly, you can actually check the opponent's kick as you move in. This is something that Joseph Valtellini teaches very well when he talked about closing the distance against an opponent. If they have better kicks than you, but you have better boxing, you can nullify their kicks by closing distance. Remember, in order to kick somebody, you need to be in kicking range. If somebody is kicking you in punching range and you're the better boxer, you're going to get the upper hand. And I feel that's what happened a lot with Joanna and Rose in the rematch, because Rose is the better boxer and Joanna is the better kickboxer, but Rose was able to control the distance better than Joanna was, mostly because of her footwork. Her footwork is a huge X factor for her, but it's very simple. It's basic boxing stuff. It's nothing ridiculously extraordinary. She's just a very good practitioner of it. And now we're going to talk about her conditioning. And this, again, is where I feel she edges her opponents out. A lot of people cannot keep up the movement that Rose does for 5 rounds, but we saw in her fight against Joanna, she's able to go 5 rounds. We saw in her rematch with Jessica Andrade that she's able to go 3 rounds. She did eventually get taken down, and the ground was originally her home. Most of her wins are by submission. And I feel a lot of people figured that if Andrade puts her on the ground, then that would be an advantage for her. But we saw her actually receive some damage on the bottom side. A lot of people feel if that was a 5-round fight, she might have lost. I think that's that depends on how she would have come out in rounds 4 and 5. And that's where I'm going to talk next about another X factor is her mindset. Rose's mental strength has often been called into question. In her fight leading up to Joanna Jędrzejczyk the first time, most people felt that she was not mentally strong enough to face a champion like Joanna. Joanna was undefeated at the time. She was on her way to breaking Ronda Rousey records, and she was pretty much dominating most people they put in front of her. A lot of people debated whether or not she beat Claudia in their fight, but for the record, she was undefeated, and she was a very strong champion. She had that bully attitude, so many felt Rose would crumble under the mental pressure, and Rose actually performed better in that situation, and I believe that has a lot to do with her preparation. She'll prepare mentally. A lot of people prepare physically for a fight, but they don't prepare mentally for it. And in the rematch, we saw her go through more adversity. Like I said, she got her leg beat up in the rematch. Joanna, I definitely agree with most people that she won rounds 3 and 4. Joanna is a bit more of a point fighter. She doesn't necessarily look for a finish. She likes to edge her opponents out and beat them at the striking game. Now, when she was going against Joanna, there wasn't really a big threat of being taken down. As a matter of fact, most people were looking at Rose as being the threat there and figured Joanna's just going to keep it stand up, as she has excellent takedown defense. But she was able to lose, or she did lose the striking game both times. So the mental edge of Rose is going to be called into question. How tough is she mentally? And I feel with preparation, she said it best herself. When she's doing her best, she is the best. But in her rematch with Andrade, I do feel there was a little bit of a chink in the armor. When the third round came and she got taken down, she didn't seem like she had as much fire going in there. When she was victorious, her demeanor changed. She was a lot more happy, even though she was a little beaten up with her eye. But mentally, I don't think she has crumbled completely from her loss to Andrade. It's very difficult for fighters to come back in a lot of cases and go against somebody who they were beating, as a matter of fact, and then knocked them out. It wasn't a fluke, it was legit knockout, but Rose was winning the fight up to that point because of her superior boxing, because of her takedown defense, because of her footwork, all those things we mentioned to this point. So how good do I think Rose is? I believe Rose is still better than Andrade. I believe she's still better than Joanna. Joanna received a lot of damage in her last fight against Zhang Weili. She did show that she still has that edge. She still has that fight inside of her. She still has that fire. She didn't make major improvements. I didn't see too much different between the way she fought Rose the second time and when she fought Zhang. The only difference was there was some more takedown defense displayed by Joanna, and that's because Zhang tried a lot more for takedowns. Rose didn't really go for takedowns in the first, second, third, fourth round. She went for a takedown in the fifth round, which she eventually got. In Joanna's fight against Zhang, we saw her stuff a lot of Zhang's takedowns in the second round especially, which was a round that I feel Joanna really dominated. So I still believe, though, Rose is better than her. Now, do I think she's better than Zhang Weili? Well, I'm going to break down how I believe that fight will go in the future, so I'll save that discussion for that time. Do I think that she is close and has a good chance of winning? Absolutely. Do I think it's going to be more difficult than her fight against Joanna? Yes, I do, and I'll explain that in the future. So that's been my breakdown of how good I believe Rose Namajunas is. I think in strawweight division, she's easily still number 2. She slightly edges people out. In some areas, like Joanna, we saw in the rematch, Joanna came back very strong and was able to win rounds consistently against Rose. And the mental strength. The mental strength is a big factor for Rose. If Rose does not feel like she's going to win, if she doesn't believe it, it shows in the way she fights. Also, she is a finisher, and she even admitted after her fight with Paige Van Zandt, where she was thoroughly dominant on the feet, thoroughly dominant on the ground, that she said that she feels that if she doesn't get the finish, it's discouraging and disappointing, and that can play mind games with the fighter. So, in the next breakdown, I'm going to talk about how good Rose is in terms of her grappling. I wanted to focus mainly on her footwork and her striking today because I feel those are the two biggest things that have helped her get where she is today. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of how good Rose is in the comments. Let me know who you think is going to win, Zhang versus Rose, and let me know what breakdown you'd like to see next. Have a good day.